Today I'm going to talk to you about flexible grouping. So, differentiated instruction is basically how you make the classroom comfortable for all varieties of learners. So, flexible grouping allows students to collaborate with one another, and the way you do that is you change groups frequently because typically people think of grouping as grouping students with varied abilities, but actually, if you group people by skill level, it's more developmentally appropriate. So, also, a teacher needs to provide respectful tasks, which means that they need to address the needs of all learners and provide an appropriate challenge for those who need it. And curriculum also has to capture student interests, so you can do this by careful observation of students and bringing in their funds of knowledge. So continual assessment, there are a variety of different assessments. So there are pre and post assessments, which you give before and after a student has learned something, and it assesses their skills. And formative and summative assessments. So summative assessments are at the end of a unit, like before a test, to kind of sum up what students have learned. And formative is continual assessments. So differentiating for content, there are different adaptations and modifications depending on the severity of the student's disability, and each student who has a disability is served on an IEP, which means that there are individual goals that each student has to meet. And differentiating for content means that teachers need to see how they would like each student to learn the material and what a reasonable goal is for each of them. The idea of fairness is that each student needs to be equipped with the materials to be on the same level as their peers. And so differentiating for process, this involves organization, centers, scaffolding, plans for early finishers, which means that you give them maybe not the same type of assignment, but a different type, like maybe a challenge that builds on the earlier assignment. And Bloom's taxonomy is basically where you give students different levels of environment depending on levels of assignments, depending on how deep you want their learning to be solidified. So differentiating for product, so basically this involves rubrics, and you can see how students can work either collaboratively or alone. You give students the option. And differentiating for environment means that you need to see what your environment conveys, whether your classroom is a place that emphasizes reading or maybe it emphasizes science. But the most important thing is that students feel safe, and then they need to have a quiet place in the room for them to go to when they're upset or if there's a conflict. Incorporating funds of knowledge means that you need to bring in the backgrounds of students into the lesson so that they connect more with the lesson. So student learning needs, basically you need to gauge student readiness, student interests, and student learning profile. And so an example of student readiness is Bloom's taxonomy and just giving them different assignments that reflect different levels of learning. Like a low-level assignment, for example, could be filling out a worksheet. And a high-level assignment could be creating a play based on that material. So the RTI model, first, all students are screened to see where they are developmentally. And then Tier 1 is just general education. All students receive a Tier 1 education, but Tier 2 is slightly more support. It's not to the level of special education yet, but students receive Tier 2 for a certain period of time, and then they are assessed to see whether they are improving or not. And then they can receive Tier 3, which means that students who receive Tier 3 are screened, and if they're not being benefited by Tier 2, then they go to more intensive instruction. But Tier 3 still isn't the level of special education yet. Special education students have to undergo a separate evaluation, and that evaluation is very comprehensive. And that is my video, so thank you so much for watching.